Our opening words are adapted from Reverend Dr. Rebecca Ann Parker. Your gifts, whatever you discover them to be, can be used to bless or curse the world. The mind's power, the strength of the hands, the reaches of the heart. The gift of speaking, listening, imagining, seeing, waiting. Any of these can serve to feed the hungry, bind up wounds, welcome the stranger, praise what is sacred, do the work of justice, or offer love. Any of these can draw down the prison door, hoard bread, abandon the poor, obscure what is holy, comply with injustice, or withhold love. You must answer this question. What will you do with your gifts?
Hello, everyone. On behalf of the entire congregation, I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Shenandoah Valley. I am Nancy Tickner, and I'll be your worship associate for today, ably assisted by UUCSB member Alice Lees. We gather together with our doubts, as well as our convictions, with our fears and our hopes, with our failures and our aspirations, with our sorrows and our joys. Whether you are joining us today for the first time, or you've been a member of or a friend for a long time, we are glad we are together in spirit. Whatever faiths you have known, if any, whatever your background, whoever you are, whomever you love, you are welcome. And now, as Alice Lees comes forward, let us all say together the words for lighting our chalice. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, to share. And I invite you to join me as we say our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help our neighbor. To these ends, we covenant one with another.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. I'm gonna keep
Today's words of meditation are adapted from a recent UUA interview with the Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Stevens, who serves the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Palouse in Moscow, Idaho. There's just something very simple and powerful about being together and naming what's true, naming the hardships and trauma, and normalizing the fact that this feels like trauma, affecting our bodies and our minds. We don't fully understand how these awful things could have happened and are happening. We don't know what to do. We don't know what to say. But we know that being together helps. To just name that can create a space so that each of us is not holding these hard things by ourselves, but we are holding them together. And together, it gets a little bit lighter and a little bit more spacious. And eventually, there's a way in which somewhere on the other side of trauma, there's wisdom, there's gifts. There's a breaking down of barriers, there's a greater wholeness. There's a deeper humanity. But we can't get there solo. It absolutely requires that community around us, those connections. It's like the web does the work. Please join me now in a time of silence as we hold in our hearts all those in our nation and around the world who are struggling with ongoing, sometimes unbearable hardships and losses. Our guest speaker today is Tom Barber, a defense attorney and the founder and executive director of the Virginia Holistic Justice Initiative in Richmond, Virginia. Tom encourages citizens' local and statewide participation in criminal justice efforts, seeing it as social ministry work well worth our pursuing. A former Marine officer who served in Iraq and Afghanistan, Tom lives with his wife, Julia Snyder, a senior public defender in Richmond, in their home in Church Hill, and is a parishioner at St. John's Episcopal Church. We welcome him.
Hello, my name is Tom Barber, and I'm a friend of the Tickner family, and I'm very grateful for the invitation and honored to be a part of your worship experience today. My goal is to share with you a bit of my work as the founder and executive director of the Virginia Holistic Justice Initiative, which is a small nonprofit in Richmond, Virginia, dedicated to criminal justice reform. And in doing so, my hope is that you will take action in your own community to join the growing criminal justice reform efforts around the country. To do this, I'm going to share with you a bit of my personal faith journey, how I came to be involved in criminal justice reform in Richmond, background on the work that the Virginia Holistic Justice Initiative does and why we do it, and how you might consider getting involved locally. And I'm going to do this really through a story about a client of ours in Richmond named Mike. Mike is about 60 years old. He's a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic, and he's addicted to crack cocaine. And when these two issues interact, Mike is in the streets. His family doesn't have the capability to really manage him. And so he finds himself intermittently homeless, and he'll walk through a neighborhood pulling on car door handles. And if those cars are open, he'll steal money or items to sell and get money. And then he'll use that money to buy crack cocaine and get high. And when he runs out, he'll repeat this cycle. You know, people in the neighborhood know Mike does this. I've met them, I've talked with them. They don't want to call the police, but they don't want him to keep doing that. And so they do call 911. He ends up getting arrested. He'll usually have drugs in his pocket. He'll be facing multiple criminal charges ranging from misdemeanors like tampering with vehicles and petty theft to felony drug possession, including felony charges for missing court inevitably. And Mike will end up looking at potentially years in prison. You know, just one conviction for felony simple possession of a narcotic in Virginia can carry up to 10 years. And that felony conviction itself comes with collateral consequences that would significantly impact his ability to access the public services that he needs. So when this happens to Mike, and when Mike's doing these things in the neighborhood, the question is posed to us about Mike through our criminal justice system. How do we as a community treat someone like Mike? How do we treat someone who is doing the wrong thing? How do we react? You know, the criminal justice system's current answer is to punish Mike, meaning to convict him, to incarcerate him, and at some point to release him. And the logic of the criminal justice system's answer is that if Mike is punished, if he spends some time in jail, he will learn his lesson and he will not do these things again. Wrong righted, problem solved. Easy as that. If you don't have any personal exposure or experience with the criminal justice system, and if you don't know anyone like Mike, then it might be easy to believe that. And why shouldn't you? Why shouldn't we? You know, this is the kind of dogmatic response to people who do wrong. This is the story that perhaps many of us have grown up with through our personal faith journeys, especially within organized religions. I mean, I know this story. You know, growing up as a Catholic, I know this story, and it's that Mike is a sinner and he can be saved, but he must pay his penance. You know, interestingly, I think for this audience in particular, it's worth understanding that the criminal justice system in the US is historically tied in with the history of Christian churches in America. It was not uncommon for stakeholders in colonial churches, for example, to also be the stakeholders in the local justice system. There could be significant crossover between judges, sheriffs, and ministers and clergy. Colonial judges often thought of their responsibility to the accused in religious terms, to save them. The term penitentiary, for example, is the place where penance is to be observed. And the Quakers in Pennsylvania were as much a part of starting the penitentiary system as they were later to be involved with advocating for its dismantle. Practices such as solitary confinement are religious in their origin, the idea being that a sinner needs to be alone to dwell upon their sins. So the history of the American criminal justice system is also the history of religion in America, and we have very much in our country a criminal justice system that is centered on morality. It's centered on a punitive framework that originates in these religious touchstones. But I have worked with the Mikes of our world in multiple contexts, including in the Catholic Church, and I've simply found this morality framework within the justice system to be capable of more harm than good. You know, like I said, I grew up in the Catholic Church. I like to say that my father, who embraced Catholicism after a troubled youth, is probably the only born-again Catholic that I've ever met. And so I very much began my life in the church. I've met Mike many times before, serving in and managing soup kitchens and other ministries. And when I served as a Marine officer in Iraq and Afghanistan, I met Mike overseas as well. You know, the incredibly impoverished, the illiterate, people using opium or other drugs, the violent. And when I became a prosecutor in Richmond's Commonwealth Attorney's Office, I saw Mike then, of course, in the courtroom, charged with the crimes, reflecting his wrongdoing, reflecting his immorality, the crimes that would set him up for his penance. And through these experiences, I've just gotten to a place in my personal faith journey where I know that the story of punishment is wrong. It's inhumane. It's ineffective. In the criminal justice system, especially, it is counterproductive to building a safer society. Mike doesn't need to earn my love or support. I forgave him before I ever knew him. I cared for him before, during, and after he did wrong. That is what it means to me to care about people like Mike, to be a good Christian or to be someone who manifests their faith in that way. And so my personal answer to the question of how do we as a community treat someone like Mike, someone who's doing the wrong thing, how do we react? I think my personal answer is probably one that will ring true with this congregation, because I think it is reflective of the principles promoted in the Unitarian Universalist Church, which is part of why I think I was asked to speak with you all and why I'm so honored to be here. I believe that we need to treat Mike with dignity and compassion. As much as our sort of initial human response would be to take that penance, to take revenge, so to speak, we need to instead overcome that and treat Mike with dignity and compassion by taking action to address his needs. We should engage in a search for the truth about why Mike is offending and connect him with social services that address those answers, that address his root causes. And so in 2018, I decided to act on these beliefs. I left my post as a prosecutor in the Richmond Commonwealth Attorney's Office. I became a defense attorney. I started a nonprofit to take direct action on these ideas, and the Virginia Holistic Justice Initiative, or VHJI, was born. VHJI is organized to serve people like Mike in the way that we think and we wish the criminal justice system would, by addressing Mike's needs as a whole person or holistically. That's where the name comes from. And then by assisting Mike with accessing social services that address those needs, all with the goal of moving Mike out of the criminal justice system and making us all safer as a result. We do this by employing a single caseworker to do this work with about 10 to 15 clients at any given time. And we also host an online resource directory called the RVA Justice Hub to empower criminal justice practitioners in the metro area to adopt a holistic approach to working with their own mics. You know, the goal of VHJI is to demonstrate that this type of social service-driven model of criminal justice is a humane and cost-effective way to create public safety. And the reason that we believe this can work is because when the mics of the world are out there violating the law, they're actually expressing the need for services. You know, Mike's not stealing for fun. He's not homeless for fun. He's not coping with the use of crack cocaine for fun. He's not committing crimes for fun. He has real and serious substance use and mental health issues. He's experienced housing instability, employment instability, transportation instability, and most of all, he's really suffering from a lack of a supportive social network. And VHJI's concept is that if we can provide these services to meet Mike's needs, then we can also expect to see a reduction in Mike's wrongdoing over time. It's not going to be perfect. There aren't going to be, zero missteps or 0 steps back, but it is a way that we can achieve public safety in the long run with a loving and caring action rather than punishment. So let me tell you about how that actually worked in Mike's case when we took him on as a client. Mike came to us with about 20 criminal charges, as we mentioned, felony drug possession, misdemeanor tampering with vehicles, petty theft, additional felonies for missing court. And the criminal justice system's reaction was to put Mike in jail, and it did for many months. Afterwards, what we did at VHJI was we had our caseworker, Han Duvernay, interview Mike and assess his needs across a variety of categories: mental health, substance use, transportation, housing, employment. Those basic needs that, when not fulfilled, we have observed tend to lead people to become involved in or get trapped in the criminal justice system. And based on that needs assessment, Han, our caseworker, then does the research across the metro area to find services that could address Mike's needs. And in doing so, we found an assisted living facility on the south side of Richmond that would provide housing, mental health support, and services for Mike's substance use. And in contrast to other agencies, especially governmental agencies like probation, we didn't stop there. We didn't just provide Mike or his family this information. We made that connection happen in a very real way. Han actually took Mike to this facility, actually filled out the paperwork, actually did the follow-up with the facility to make sure that Mike got into it. And eventually he did, and he's been there for some time. This is the work. This is the social service-driven work that actually keeps Mike safe and our community safe. But it's not the work that the criminal justice system currently does. The criminal justice system doesn't actually create public safety because it's not organized to do that. It processes punishment because that is what it is set up to do. And in processing punishment, it is often counterproductive to public safety, ineffective in that regard, inhumane, and expensive, and it needs to change. I truly believe that criminal justice reform is the most significant social issue of my generation. I think it's the most obviously harmful institution in America that is still actively operating. And over the last year, the public's awareness and interest in reforming the criminal justice system has grown dramatically in response to the murder of George Floyd and the resulting nationwide protests. And if you're interested in getting involved, my advice to you and the whole point of me speaking with you today is to encourage you to start locally. People in the criminal justice system truly are the voiceless, the underrepresented. They are, I think, some of our most vulnerable community members, even as they are at the same time, those community members who are doing wrong. And they deserve our love and attention. Go sit in your local general district and circuit court hearings. They're open to the public. And watch what happens to people. I looked up some of the outcomes in your area, and I'm seeing folks being sentenced to 20 days for nonviolent petty shoplifting, 20 days in jail. And this is happening all over Virginia, right under our noses, because oftentimes the people in positions to do good, who have, achieved a certain power or position or ability in life, often aren't connected to the folks who are being subjected to continuing involvement in the criminal justice system. But you can be a part of making a significant change. And I hope that this talk has inspired you at least to learn more about these issues and perhaps become involved, add a criminal justice component to your personal volunteering or even your social ministry programming at UUCSV. And I hope that you've enjoyed this background on the work that I do on the criminal justice system and how we can make a difference through collective action. And I wish the best to you and yours for a wonderful rest of your Sunday. And thank you again for having me.
Words for Reflection. A poem by Unitarian Universalist minister and poet Lynn Unger, entitled Law and Order, from These Days, Poetry of the Pandemic Age. When you say law and order, what order is it that you mean? Numerical? Chronological? Alphabetical? Are you perhaps envisioning the great chain of being dangling down from the heavens with God at the top and the rest, angels, men, women, children, beasts, neatly attached like hanging beads? Who is above you on that chain? Who is below? What if we all were unfettered, not chained together, but woven? Not dropped from the heavens, but knit together here on earth. What if the law is, you shall love your neighbor as yourself?
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We can feed on every need. Every need. We can feed on every need. Every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed on every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these
Now, as Alice comes forward, let us say together the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of our community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Our closing words are written by UU minister and poet Max A. Coots. After the words, a quiet. After the songs, a silence. After the crowd, only the memory recalls the gathering. Peace and justice have need of you after the words, the music, and the gathering. God grants you the depth for dedication to justice. God grants you the will to be an apostle of peace. Amen.
The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather to grow more generous in spirit and in action. We hope you will consider making an offering after today's service through our webpage, uushenandoah.org, which allows us to exercise that generosity of spirit for this self-supporting church and its many ministries.
Deep, deep peace from the earth to you. Deep, deep peace from the sky to you. Deep, deep peace from the sea